Ah, conformity. To conform or not to conform? I suppose back in the 60s I would have been a nonconformist with my long hair, my hippiedom, my hippie nature. I guess I'd be called a communist by, the standards of the era. But that aside, in the modern day, it's not the same thing. Long hair on men has come and gone, just like men used to wear skirts and dresses, right? Times change, styles change, people change, ideas change. It's just the nature of the beast. All along the way, there's this idea of whether you should conform with the norms of the time. And for example, language today has changed. The things that are acceptable to say. I hate to bring this up again, but George Carlin nailed it with the whole soft language thing. If you're not familiar, just Google, look on YouTube, George Carlin soft language. It was always about changing things from, for example, homelessness to home challenged person, or person experiencing homelessness rather than being homeless. We have complicated language, but this is comes and goes with the era, right? And I'm not going to get into all the modern weirdness that we already have, even regarding politics, gender, religion. I'm not I'm not here to argue what's right and wrong and normal and not normal, because I know that it changes so often. That said, there are some basic norms that we consider in being a human. For example, don't steal from other people, right? But people find an exception. If you're starving and the wealthy are stealing from you, maybe you would steal back from them, right? Just like a person would say, "Thou shalt not kill." Seems like a very simple concept. I've picked that one apart when I was a kid. I was like, okay, so you shouldn't kill, but what if somebody's going to kill you first? Is that acceptable? Well, that's self defense. That doesn't change that the basic commandment is broken, right? Would I allow myself to be killed? No. Not if I could protect myself. Would I allow a loved one to be killed? No, of course not. What about a stranger? I don't know. Depends on the person. That's where it gets murky. And every concept of being a human, and our basic morals and values can be compromised by just simple thought experiments. The trolley experiment is a very famous one. It's not my favorite, but, you know, if you're not familiar, it's very simple. A trolley is going down a track, and up ahead, it can break off into two different tracks. The track it's going down is going to kill one person who's tied to the tracks. Or, sorry, five people who are tied to the tracks. But if you pull the lever, it will move it to the other side and it will only kill one person. So, would you decide to sacrifice one person to save five? And if so, you would be the one responsible for that one person's death. It gets blurry, it gets complex, and it gets interesting. It gets The more you think about these things, these conundrums, the more you start to realize that maybe the norm doesn't exist. And you find that almost everything that we have as humans is constructed by our ideas and theories about what's normal and right. Working a 9 to 5 job is weird. Even a couple hundred years ago, before, people would go to work and they would, you know, there were totally different schedules. I would say, let's go back, 500 years before the average place had clocks. Um, and maybe it was a little longer. I'm not going to recall the exact time clocks were invented, but I think it was about 500 years ago or so that when, or six, maybe six, that when people went into work, they would just kind of show up whenever, because nobody really had the time. You just go by the sun. And people would show up to work, and then they would leave to take a break, and they would be gone for hours and maybe come back for a couple of hours. There was no such thing as a normal schedule. But the whole idea was that people were taken care of. If they went and helped in these fields and they helped people harvest, they'd have enough food. But now it's not about having enough food. It's about being able to stand in line for hours to buy the latest iPhone. It's about camping out for Taylor Swift tickets, or, it's 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 a weird time where people spend ungodly sums of money on dumb shit. And that's their choice, of course. But it's like missing out on the whole point of existence as humans as a whole, that it's not about consistent progress. That somebody said the other day, I don't recall where it was on some podcast, he said, humans expect exponential growth and continuation without stopping. He said the only other thing that does that is cancer. It's like, that's true. You know, I've always wanted to say, I fight against the idea that humans are a cancer, but, because I believe we have such potential. I believe the cancer is within the human race. It's not humans in general. The It manifests itself as greed, corruption, you know, hatred, violence. It's gross, you know. It's uh it's the side of humanity that reminds us that you got to watch out. You got to lock your doors. You got to protect yourself. Even carrying a firearm for people, or you know, having basic, bodyguards, these kinds of things. There are people who want to harm others all over the place. And most of us stay out of the limelight. You know, we don't get attacked. We don't get harassed by most people. We might get picked on in school. Many of us did, myself included. We might also have, fights or issues as adults, which we surely will. But for the most part, the things we fight about and the people that most people get in fights with are people they know, people they love. There's a pain that comes along with somebody harming you, even mentally, and therefore, people are emotionally unstable, most of us. And all people want is love, acceptance, understanding. It's not about the money. The money and the fame and, the stuff, the wares, all the Lamborghinis and you know, the, the idea of buying a whole bunch of shit to make you happy is usually more to impress other people than yourself. It's the subconscious desire to be loved and liked and admired by what we have instead of who we are. That's not always true. Some people just enjoy having stuff, but I think deep down, all of us just want to be accepted and be unique and show other people our success and what we've done. Even if it's not financial success, it might be somebody bragging about, like a podcast I listened to today on a psychedelic podcast. I don't remember which one it was, but this guy was talking about how he went to Peru, he discovered psychedelics, it changed his life, and he ended up staying there for 20 years and basically got trained to be a shaman, right? And he was talking about how he'd learned all the different chants and all the different things. And for the whole hour, he was basically going on about how, well, so many people, they claim to be, that they can be shamans, but they haven't gone through the proper training. They haven't been with these tribes and learned the songs and all this. And I said, well, God, it's so fucking subjective, bro. You know, you think that your tribe is the shamans. Well, somebody else could just maybe get a direct message from God or have a connection that's deeper than you can understand. There's a certain arrogance about the time we put in doing something, and that's the way people feel about the investment they put into their, buying stuff, uh, earning money. Some people get addicted to all of it, but what if you're just humble and you just try to live your life and do the best you can? Are those people happier? I wonder sometimes, because I've never had a lot of money. So I wonder what it would be like to be able to get the things I want. Because I have a dream, I have a desire. I know what I want. My wife and I have been working, hard and work for years hoping to get a piece of land with a small house. We know what we want in our price range and we can almost afford it, right? And we do have a dream, but I know once we get that, of course, there's always something else that you want, right? And maybe that's not necessarily true because I see people who have a piece of land. The houses that I work on sometimes, they're just like, wow, not huge houses, just out in the country. There's one I work on out in Camas, Washington, and it overlooks, you can see Portland way down there, and you can watch the fog roll in and the rain, and it's a beautiful view. And I just think my wife and I could live here with our kids, and at least give them something awesome for the last few years, that they're in school. Um, to be able to have a home that's not just in a suburb somewhere. But, at the same time, I'm extremely grateful for what I have, that I don't live in an apartment somewhere. That, I don't know what normal is to other people. I grew up living in a few apartments and smaller places. Had some weird situations, but ultimately, most people, I think, just want a basically happy life without all the controversy and, you know, frustration that comes along with day to day life, the bullshit we have to endure, going to work for, 8, 10, 12 hours a day for people and not being able to afford to even live. And we're so distracted by that. But hopefully one day, we'll I feel like people as a whole might pull our heads out of our asses one day. Can only hope so. At any rate, I got somebody coming to look at a chair that I was going to sell, so I got to go. Thanks for listening. Check out the podcast. I got a Patreon. Leave a comment, like, all that shit. See you next time.